Desperation burned in Violet Fairchild's eyes as she clutched her skirts, feeling the trembling hands of her 3 hungry children who clung to her like lifelines in the crowded saloon of Black Hawk, Colorado. It was the spring of 1876, and the mining town that had once promised so much had delivered nothing but heartache since her husband's death 3 months prior. The youngest, 4-year-old Emma, whimpered against Violet's threadbare dress. 6-year-old James stood silent but shaking, his hollow cheeks a testament to days without proper food. 8-year-old Sarah, trying to be brave, kept her eyes fixed on the floorboards, too proud to watch the dining patrons enjoying their steaming plates of food. "Please, children," Violet whispered, her voice barely audible above the piano music and boisterous laughter. "We'll find something soon." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. The last of their money had gone toward the room at the boarding house, a necessity, as the spring rains had made sleeping rough impossible. She had been turned away from every establishment seeking work, her 3 children an encumbrance no business owner wanted to accommodate. The saloon had been her last hope. Perhaps someone would need laundry done, floors scrubbed, anything to earn enough for a meal. But the barkeep had taken one look at her children and shaken his head before she could even make her request. "Madam," he'd said gruffly, "this ain't no place for little ones, best move along." But Violet couldn't move. Her legs felt leaden, her stomach a gnawing emptiness that mirrored the hunger in her children's eyes. They had walked so far today, and pride could no longer outweigh necessity. From across the room, a man observed the small family with keen interest. Nicholas Calloway had been in Black Hawk for only 2 weeks, having ridden in from Wyoming after 5 years working cattle drives. At 32, he had seen his share of hardship on the frontier, but something about the quiet dignity of the woman and her 3 starving children stirred something deep within him. He watched as she stood near the wall, neither begging nor drawing attention, simply waiting with the patient desperation of someone who had exhausted all other options. Nicholas caught the eye of Martha, the waitress who had just delivered his steak dinner. "Martha," he said quietly, tipping his hat back slightly from his sun-weathered forehead, "who might that lady be with the 3 young ones?" Martha followed his gaze and her expression softened. "That's Violet Fairchild. Poor thing. Her husband Peter died in the mine collapse this winter. Left her with those 3 and not a penny to her name." She shook her head sadly. "Been trying to find work, but nobody wants to hire a woman with 3 mouths to feed tagging along." Nicholas considered this as he cut into his steak. His plate was heaped with potatoes and beans, as well enough to feed a hard-working man after a long day, but suddenly it seemed an indulgence. "Could you bring me 4 more plates?" he asked, reaching into his pocket and producing several coins. "Same as mine, and bring them directly here." Martha's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she nodded and hurried toward the kitchen. Nicholas turned his attention back to his meal, but his mind remained on the family huddled by the wall. He'd seen enough suffering in his travels to recognize true desperation, and something about the quiet strength in the woman's posture struck him. She wasn't looking for charity, that much was clear from the way she held herself, back straight despite the children clinging to her skirts. When Martha returned with the 4 steaming plates balanced expertly on her arms, Nicholas stood. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of physical labor, with a face that had seen too much sun and not enough easy living. Still, there was a gentleness in his blue eyes that belied his rugged exterior. "Thank you, Martha," he said, placing the plates carefully on his table. Then, removing his hat, he walked across the room toward Violet and her children. Violet tensed as she saw the large man approaching. She had learned to be wary of men's attention in a town like this, especially since becoming a widow. "Madam," Nicholas said, his voice low and respectful as he stopped a few paces away. "I couldn't help but notice you and your children standing here. I've got more food than one man can eat at my table, and I'd consider it a kindness if you join me." Violet's first instinct was to refuse. Pride was sometimes all a person had left, and hers had taken enough blows. But then Emma whimpered again, and Sarah's small hand tightened in her skirt. "I don't accept charity, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but firm nonetheless. Nicholas nodded as though he'd expected nothing less. "Not charity, madam. Just seems a shame to let good food go to waste. And truth be told, I've been riding solo too long. Would appreciate the company if you're willing." For a long moment, Violet looked into his eyes, searching for deceit or ulterior motives. What she found instead was a straightforward kindness that seemed rare in these parts. Slowly, she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway." "Nicholas Calloway." He tipped his hat. "And you are Violet Fairchild. These are my children, Sarah, James, and Emma." Nicholas smiled at each child in turn, then gestured toward his table. "Well, Miss Fairchild, shall we eat before it gets cold?" As they crossed the saloon floor, Violet was acutely aware of the stairs. Whispers followed them, the widow Fairchild and her brood, sitting down with the new cowboy in town. But hunger outweighed embarrassment, and when they reached the table, the sight of the 4 full plates made Emma gasp audibly. "Now then," Nicholas said, helping the smallest child into a chair, "let's not stand on ceremony. Dig in while it's hot." The children looked to their mother, who nodded permission. Within seconds, they were eating with the focused intensity of the truly hungry. Violet herself hesitated only briefly before taking her first bite, closing her eyes momentarily at the rich flavor of a proper meal. Nicholas ate his own food slowly, watching the family without being obvious about it. There was a grace to Violet Fairchild that spoke of better days. Her hands, though work-roughened now, showed signs of once having been well kept. Her speech was educated, her manners impeccable despite her circumstances. "You're new to Black Hawk, Mr. Calloway?" Violet asked after she had eaten enough to take the edge off her hunger. "Yes, madam. Came in from Wyoming Territory, looking for a change of scenery." "And what brings you to a mining town? You don't strike me as a miner." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "No, madam, not a miner. I've been working cattle most of my life. Thought I might try my hand at something different. Heard they were looking for men at the livery stable." Violet nodded, understanding. The livery was one of the few businesses still thriving in Black Hawk. Miners needed horses, as did the freighters who hauled ore down to Denver. "And you, Mrs. Fairchild, I understand you've had some difficult times." Violet glanced at her children, who were too focused on their food to pay much attention to the adults' conversation. "My husband was killed in the mine collapse at the North Star. We had come out from Pennsylvania 2 years ago. Peter thought we would make our fortune here." A sad smile crossed her face. Like so many others, Nicholas nodded, understanding all too well the broken dreams that littered the West. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam. Thank you." She watched her children eat for a moment, her eyes softening. "We're managing." But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. A woman alone with 3 children had few options in a place like Black Hawk. Without family or means, the future looked bleak indeed. "If you don't mind my asking, what are your plans now?" Nicholas asked carefully, not wanting to offend but genuinely concerned. Violet sighed, keeping her voice low. "I've been trying to find work. Laundry, cleaning, cooking, anything, really. But no one seems inclined to hire a woman with 3 children in tow." Nicholas considered this. "The hotel might need help. Mrs. Daniels runs the place, and she's got a soft spot for folks down on their luck. I could put in a word if you like." Hope flickered briefly in Violet's eyes, but she quickly tamped it down. "That's very kind, Mr. Calloway, but I wouldn't want to impose further." "No imposition, madam, just being neighborly." As they finished their meal, Emma, the youngest, looked up at Nicholas with wide eyes. "Thank you for the food, mister. It was the best I ever had." Nicholas felt something tighten in his chest at the child's simple gratitude. "You're very welcome, Miss Emma. A pleasure to dine with such fine company." When they had eaten their fill, Violet straightened her shoulders and met Nicholas's gaze directly. "Mr. Calloway, I want you to know that I intend to repay your kindness." "That's not necessary. It is to me," she interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I may not have much, but I do have my word, and I give it to you now that I will repay this debt." Nicholas recognized the pride behind her words and knew better than to argue. "As you wish, Mrs. Fairchild. But please know that it was freely given." As they rose to leave, Nicholas had an idea. "Mrs. Fairchild, if you're agreeable, I could stop by the hotel tomorrow and speak with Mrs. Daniels. Perhaps you and the children could meet me there around noon." Violet hesitated, but the practical side of her nature won out. She couldn't afford to turn down any opportunity, no matter how it came about. "That would be very kind, Mr. Calloway. We'll be there." With that, she gathered her children, each one thanking Nicholas in turn before following their mother out of the saloon. Nicholas watched them go, struck by the dignified way Violet Fairchild carried herself despite her circumstances. There was something about her that called to him a strength he recognized and respected. Whether it was fate or chance that had brought them together this evening, he couldn't say. But as he paid his bill and stepped out into the cool Colorado night, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow in a way he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The following morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of spring day that promised renewal after the harsh mountain winter. Violet woke early, as was her habit, and set about making herself and the children as presentable as possible with their limited resources. "Mama, are we really going to see the cowboy again?" Emma asked as Violet braided her hair. "His name is Mr. Calloway, Emma, and yes, we are going to meet him at the hotel. He thinks the owner might have worked for me. I like him," the little girl declared. "He has kind eyes." From the other side of their small rented room, Sarah spoke up. "Papa had kind eyes too." There was a trace of accusation in her voice that made Violet's heart ache. "Yes, he did, darling." Violet finished Emma's braid and moved to her eldest daughter. "No one could ever replace your papa. Mr. Calloway is just being neighborly, helping us find our feet." Sarah said nothing more, but Violet could see the doubt in her eyes. At 8 years old, Sarah remembered their life before Black Hawk more clearly than the younger children, the small but comfortable house in Pennsylvania. The security of having a father who came home every night, the certainty of their next meal. James, always the quiet one, sat on the edge of the bed swinging his legs. "Will we have to move again, Mama, if you get work at the hotel?" Violet considered this. Their current lodgings were temporary, at best a single room above the general store that the owner had let them use out of pity following Peter's death. But the arrangement couldn't last. Perhaps. We'll see what Mrs. Daniels says. By 11:45, Violet had the children ready, their faces washed, clothes as neat as could be managed. She herself had done what she could with her one good dress, mended so many times it was barely holding together. "Remember your manners," she reminded them as they walked the short distance to the hotel. "This is important." The Black Hawk Hotel was the finest establishment in town, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards, but it represented respectability in the rough mining community. 2 stories tall with a wide front porch, It catered to businessmen, mining investors, and the occasional tourist venturing into the mountains. As they approached, Violet saw Nicholas Calloway waiting on the porch, hat in hand. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance as well. His clothes were clean, his dark hair neatly combed, the stubble from yesterday replaced by a clean-shaven jaw that revealed a strong chin and the hint of a dimple on his right cheek. "Mrs. Fairchild," he said, nodding respectfully as they approached. "Children, right on time." "Mr. Calloway," Violet acknowledged. "I hope we haven't kept you waiting." "Not at all. I've spoken with Mrs. Daniels and she's expecting us." He held the door open for them, and Violet ushered the children inside, acutely aware of the contrast between their shabby appearance and the relative luxury of the hotel lobby. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, the floors were polished wood rather than rough planks, and the furniture, while not extravagant, was well made and comfortable. Mrs. Daniels emerged from a back office, a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She looked Violet up and down with an appraising gaze that missed nothing. "So you're the widow Fairchild," she said without preamble. "Mr. Calloway here speaks highly of you." Violet glanced at Nicholas, surprised that he would have formed any opinion of her at all after one brief meeting. "He says you're looking for honest work and that you're not afraid of hard labor," Mrs. Daniels continued. "That true?" "Yes, madam," Violet replied steadily. "I'll do whatever work is available." "And these three," Mrs. Daniels gestured to the children. "They're well-behaved and can help with small tasks. They won't be a burden." Mrs. Daniels pursed her lips, considering. "I lost my chambermaid last week. Ran off with a drummer passing through town. Been trying to manage on my own, but with the spring rush coming, I need the help." She paused, eyeing the children again. "There's a room in the back, used to be storage. Not much, but it's got a window and enough space for a bed. You can have it and $3 a week, plus meals for you and the young ones." Violet felt her knees go weak with relief. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had dared hope for: a roof, food, and wages. "That's very generous, Mrs. Daniels. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. It's hard work and I run a tight ship. You'll be up before dawn and working till after dark. If it doesn't suit, say so now." "It suits just fine," Violet assured her. "When would you like me to start?" "Right now, if you're willing. We've got guests arriving on the afternoon stage and rooms to ready." Nicholas, who had been standing quietly by, spoke up. "Perhaps Mrs. Fairchild could get her children settled first." "I'd be happy to fetch their belongings from their current lodgings." Mrs. Daniels waved a hand. "Fine, fine. Get situated and then report to the kitchen. Martha will show you what needs doing." With that, she bustled off, already calling for someone named Thomas to see to the coal delivery. Once she was gone, Violet turned to Nicholas, her eyes bright with unshed tears of gratitude. "Mr. Calloway, I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks, Mrs. Fairchild. I'm just glad it worked out." He placed his hat back on his head. "If you'll tell me where your things are, I'll bring them over while you get the children settled." "That's very kind, but I couldn't ask." "You're not asking. I'm offering." His smile was warm, transforming his weathered face. "Besides, I reckon it won't take long." "Something tells me you travel light." There was no condescension in his tone, only understanding, and Violet found herself returning his smile. "Very light, I'm afraid. We're at Simmons' General Store, the room upstairs. Mr. Simmons will show you. I'll be back directly then." He tipped his hat and was gone, his long strides carrying him quickly out the door. Violet turned to her children, who had been watching the exchange with varying degrees of interest. "Well," she said, trying to infuse her voice with cheerfulness, "it seems we have a new home. Shall we see what it's like?" The room, as Mrs. Daniels had warned, was small and had clearly been used for storage. But it was clean, with a narrow window that let in light and air, and a bed that, while not large, would accommodate Violet and her daughters. James, she decided, could sleep on the small cot in the corner. "It's not so bad," she told the children as they explored the space. "And we'll have regular meals and a proper roof over our heads." "And Mr. Calloway is nearby?" Emma asked hopefully. Violet shook her head, uncertain. "I don't know where Mr. Calloway is staying, sweetheart, but I'm sure we'll see him around town." Sarah, ever observant, gave her mother a searching look. "You like him, don't you, Mama?" The question caught Violet off guard. "I barely know him, Sarah. He's been kind to us, that's all." "Papa always said to be careful of kind strangers," the girl persisted. "He said they usually want something in return." The words stung, partly because there was truth in them. Peter had been a cautious man, skeptical of others' motives, a trait that had served him well in the competitive world of mining. But it had also kept him somewhat isolated, resistant to forming the community bonds that might have helped his family after his death. "Your papa was right that we should be careful," Violet said carefully. "But sometimes, Sarah, people are kind simply because it's the right thing to do. I believe Mr. Calloway is one of those people." Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock at the door and Nicholas entered, carrying Violet's single trunk and a smaller bundle of the children's few possessions. "Here we are," he said cheerfully, setting the trunk down. "Mr. Simmons sends his regards and says not to worry about next week's rent. Said it was paid through the month anyway." Violet frowned slightly. She knew for a fact that the room had only been paid through yesterday. Peter's death benefit from the mine had covered that much and no more. Which meant that Nicholas had paid the difference himself, another act of charity he'd tried to disguise. "Mr. Calloway," she began, but he raised a hand to stop her. "Mrs. Fairchild, I know what you're going to say, and I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't. A man's entitled to settle his accounts as he sees fit." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Nicholas was offering her a way to accept his help without sacrificing her pride, and Violet found herself grateful for his tact as much as his generosity. "Very well," she said finally. "Thank you for bringing our things." "My pleasure." He glanced around the small room. "It's a good start, Mrs. Fairchild, and Mrs. Daniels, for all her gruff manner, is fair. She won't work you beyond your strength." "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Calloway." His eyes softened. "Of that I have no doubt." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Emma tugged at Nicholas's sleeve. "Are you going to visit us, Mr. Calloway? Mama says we'll have meals here now." Nicholas crouched down to the child's level, his expression serious. "Would you like that, Miss Emma? I wouldn't want to impose." "Oh yes," Emma said enthusiastically. "You can tell us cowboy stories." Nicholas laughed, a rich, warm sound that seemed to fill the small room. "Well, I do have a few of those." He looked up at Violet, seeking permission. "You'd be welcome, Mr. Calloway," she said, surprised to find she meant it. "Perhaps Sunday dinner if you're not otherwise engaged." "I'd like that very much." He straightened up and reached for his hat. "But I've kept you long enough, and I believe Mrs. Daniels is expecting you in the kitchen. I'll let you get settled." As he turned to go, Violet called after him. "Mr. Calloway," he paused, looking back. "Thank you for everything." He simply nodded, a small smile playing at his lips, and then he was gone, leaving Violet and her children to begin their new life at the Black Hawk Hotel. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work and adaptation. Violet rose before dawn each day to help prepare the hotel for the day's business. She cleaned rooms, changed linens, hauled water, and assisted in the kitchen when needed. The work was exhausting, but she approached it with determination, grateful for the security it provided. The children adjusted to their new circumstances with the resilience of youth. Sarah and James attended the small school in town during the day, while Emma stayed at the hotel, often helping Martha, the cook, with simple tasks. By evening, all three were tired but well-fed, a vast improvement over their previous situation. True to his word, Nicholas Calloway came to Sunday dinner that first week, and then the next. He arrived with small gifts, a bag of candy for the children, a book of stories he thought they might enjoy, a small potted plant to brighten their room. Never anything expensive or ostentatious, just thoughtful tokens that spoke of his growing attachment to the family. For her part, Violet found herself looking forward to his visits more than she cared to admit. There was something solid and dependable about Nicholas that reminded her of the best parts of her late husband. Yet he was entirely his own person, more open, perhaps, more willing to show warmth. On the fourth Sunday after they had moved into the hotel, Nicholas arrived wearing his best shirt, his dark hair still damp from washing. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Mrs. Fairchild," he greeted Violet with a slight bow. "Children, you're looking well." It was true. With regular meals and the security of steady employment, all four had begun to regain the health that hardship had stolen. The children's faces were fuller, their eyes brighter, and even Violet had lost the pinched look of constant worry. "Mr. Calloway," she returned his greeting with a smile. "Right on time, as always. A man who can't keep his appointments isn't much of a man at all," Nicholas replied, handing the package to Violet. "A small token, if you'll accept it." Curious, Violet unwrapped the package to find a delicate lace collar, the kind that could be attached to a dress to freshen its appearance. "It's beautiful," she said softly, running her fingers over the intricate pattern. "But I can't possibly, please," Nicholas interrupted. "I noticed your dress was becoming worn at the collar and thought this might. Well, I hope it's not too presumptuous." Violet looked up at him, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It was practical yet personal, acknowledging her circumstances without emphasizing them. "Thank you." "It's perfect." Their eyes met, and for a moment everything else seemed to fade away. Then Emma tugged at Nicholas's hand, breaking the spell. "Mr. Nicholas, come see what I made," she exclaimed, pulling him toward a small drawing she had created. Nicholas allowed himself to be led away, listening with exaggerated interest as Emma explained her artwork. Violet watched them, a warm feeling spreading through her chest that she wasn't quite ready to name. After dinner, while the children were occupied with the book Nicholas had brought previously, the two adults sat at the small table in Violet's room, sharing a pot of coffee. "You've done wonders with this space," Nicholas commented, looking around at the touches. Violet had added curtains made from flour sacks, a small rag rug by the bed, wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill. "It's amazing what a bit of determination can accomplish," she replied. "And having a proper income helps, of course. Mrs. Daniels seems pleased with your work. I hear the hotel hasn't been this well run in years." Violet smiled at the compliment. "She's a fair employer, demanding but not unreasonable." She paused, then asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "And you, Mr. Calloway, are you settling into Black Hawk?" Nicholas nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "The livery keeps me busy enough. Mr. Johnson is talking about making me foreman come fall if I stay on." "And will you stay on, I mean?" He looked at her steadily, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "I believe I will. I've found reasons to put down roots here." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to acknowledge it directly. "I'm glad," Violet said finally. "The children would miss your Sunday visits." "Only the children." There was a hint of teasing in his voice, but vulnerability too. Violet felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I would miss them as well, Mr. Calloway." "Nicholas," he corrected gently. "After all this time, I think you might call me Nicholas." "Nicholas," she repeated, the name feeling right on her lips. "Then you must call me Violet." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less weathered by the harsh frontier life. "Violet," he said, as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you." The moment was interrupted by James, who came to show Nicholas a sum he had mastered in school. The intimate conversation was set aside, but something had shifted between them, a boundary crossed that could not be uncrossed. As May turned to June, and June to July, Nicholas became a regular fixture in the Fairchild family's life. He took the children fishing in the creek outside town, taught James how to whittle, brought Sarah books from the small lending library in Central City. For Violet, he provided companionship and a steady friendship that was beginning to deepen into something more. On a warm July evening, Nicholas invited Violet to join him for a walk after the children were asleep. Martha, who had become something of an ally, agreed to listen for the children. "You work too hard," Nicholas said as they strolled along the main street of Black Hawk, the setting sun casting long shadows across the dusty road. "A walk in the evening air will do you good," says the man who works from dawn till dusk at the livery, Violet teased, comfortable now in his company. "That's different. I'm used to hard work. Before the livery, I was driving cattle across Wyoming, spent more time in the saddle than out of it." "And before that?" Violet asked, realizing how little she actually knew about his past. Nicholas was quiet for a moment. "I grew up in Missouri on a small farm, left home at 17 after my parents died in a fever outbreak. Been moving ever since until now." "I'm sorry about your parents," Violet said softly. "It's not easy losing family." "No, it's not," he glanced at her. "You've handled it with more grace than most, Violet. Your children are fortunate to have such a mother." "I do what I must, as we all do." They had reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open country. Without discussion, they turned onto a small path that led up a gentle slope. At the top, they could see the whole of Black Hawk spread below them, the lights just beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "It's beautiful in its way," Nicholas said, gesturing to the view. "Not what you were used to in Pennsylvania, I imagine." "No," Violet agreed, "but it has its own charm." She paused, then added, "Peter believed there was a fortune to be made here. He was so certain." Nicholas was quiet, allowing her to speak of her late husband without awkwardness. "He was a good man," Violet continued. "Ambitious, perhaps too much so, but he wanted to give us a better life." "He must have loved you very much," Violet nodded, tears unexpectedly stinging her eyes. "We married young. I was 18, he was 20. We grew up together in many ways." She wiped at her eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak of him so often." "Don't apologize," Nicholas said gently. "He was your husband, the father of your children. Of course you speak of him." His understanding touched her deeply. "Thank you, Nicholas." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge. "May I ask you something, Violet?" Nicholas finally said. "Of course. You think you could ever? That is, would you consider?" He stopped, seemingly frustrated with his own inability to find the right words. "What I'm trying to say is I care for you, very much, and for the children. These past months have been the happiest I can remember." Violet's heart quickened. "Nicholas, please let me finish. I know it's too soon, and I know you may never feel for me what you felt for Peter. But I wanted you to know that, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I would be honored to court you properly." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Violet found herself deeply moved by his sincerity and his respect for her grief. "Nicholas," she said again, her voice steadier now, "I care for you too, more than I expected to, more than I thought possible after Peter. But you're right that it's soon. The children need time," he finished for her. "I understand. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, Violet, just the permission to hope." She looked up at him in the starlight, this good man who had come into their lives when they needed him most. "You have it," she said softly. "The permission to hope." His smile was worth any uncertainty she might feel. Tentatively, he reached for her hand, and she allowed him to take it, their fingers intertwining in a promise of possibilities to come. As they walked back toward town, hand in hand now, Violet felt lighter than she had in months. The future, which had seemed so bleak not long ago, now held the promise of joy again. It wouldn't be easy, she had 3 children to consider, and the memory of Peter would always be with them, but for the first time since her husband's death, Violet Fairchild allowed herself to hope for happiness. The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet joy for Violet. Nicholas, true to his word, courted her with patience and respect. He never pressed for more than she was ready to give, content to be part of their lives in whatever capacity she allowed. For the children, the adjustment varied. Emma, young and naturally affectionate, had attached herself to Nicholas almost immediately, often waiting by the window for his arrival. James, too, seemed to welcome the man's presence, hungry for the male guidance that had been missing since his father's death. Sarah remained more reserved. Though she was unfailingly polite to Nicholas, she maintained a certain distance, watching his interactions with her mother through wary eyes. "She'll come around," Nicholas assured Violet one evening in late August as they sat on the hotel's back porch after the younger children had gone to bed. Sarah had excused herself earlier, claiming fatigue but clearly uncomfortable with the adults' growing closeness. "I worry about her," Violet admitted. "She was so close to Peter. Of all the children, she remembers him most clearly." "That's natural. She's protecting his memory and you." Nicholas took Violet's hand, a gesture that had become familiar between them. "She needs to know that I'm not trying to replace him." "Aren't you, though?" Violet asked softly. "At least in some ways." Nicholas considered this thoughtfully. "I could never replace what Peter was to any of you. I wouldn't want to try, but perhaps I can be something different, something new." He squeezed her hand. "If you and the children will have me." The implication was clear, though he had not formally proposed. Violet felt her heart race at the possibility. "Nicholas, are you saying—" "I'm saying that I love you, Violet Fairchild. I love your children. And when you're ready, all of you, I want to make a life together." Tears welled in Violet's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, the words both frightening and freeing. "But Sarah needs time," he finished. "And I'm willing to give it to her, to all of you." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door opening behind them. Sarah stood there, her nightgown billowing slightly in the evening breeze. "I thought I heard voices," she said, her young face solemn in the lamplight spilling from inside. "Is everything all right?" Violet quickly wiped away her tears. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Mr. Calloway and I were just talking." Sarah's eyes moved from her mother to Nicholas and back again, missing nothing. "About what?" Nicholas met the child's gaze steadily. "About the future, Sarah. About how much I care for your mother and for you and your brother and sister." Sarah frowned slightly. "Are you going to marry my mother?" The directness of the question startled both adults. Violet opened her mouth to deflect, but Nicholas spoke first. "I would like to someday, if your mother will have me and if you children are comfortable with the idea." His honesty was gentle but unflinching. "How would you feel about that, Sarah?" The girl was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Would we have to call you Papa? No, Nicholas said immediately. You had a papa who loved you very much. No one can take his place. You could call me Nicholas as you do now, or anything else that feels right to you. Would we stay here at the hotel? That would be up to your mother, but I was thinking we might find a house, something with a yard for you children to play in. Sarah processed this information, her young mind working through the implications. My papa used to read to me every night, she said finally. Even when he was tired from the mine. Nicholas nodded, understanding the significance of this shared memory. That sounds like a wonderful tradition. Do you read, Mr. Calloway? I do. Not as well as some, perhaps, but I enjoy a good story. Sarah seemed to come to a decision. If you married my mother, would you read to us sometimes? Nicholas's expression softened. I would be honored to, Sarah. The girl nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. I'm going back to bed now, she announced. Good night, Mama. Good night, Mr. Calloway. Good night, sweetheart, Violet said, watching as her daughter disappeared back inside. When the door closed behind her, Violet turned to Nicholas, her eyes wide. I think that might have been acceptance of a sort. Nicholas smiled. I think you might be right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, holding it in his closed fist. I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. He opened his hand to reveal a ring, a simple band with a small, sparkling stone. It's not much, he said apologetically. Not what you deserve, but it's a promise, Violet. A promise that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make you and the children happy. Violet looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, and felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was not the future she had imagined for herself when she came west with Peter, but it was a future filled with love and hope nonetheless. Yes, she said simply, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened again. Yes, Nicholas Calloway, I will marry you. His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant to be there all along. Nicholas leaned forward, and for the first time, kissed Violet a gentle, reverent kiss that held the promise of all the years to come. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, the kind of deep happiness that comes when one has found their way home after a long journey. We should tell the children tomorrow, Violet said, looking at the ring on her finger with wonder. All together, Nicholas agreed. A new beginning for all of us. The following morning, Violet gathered her children in their room before breakfast. Nicholas stood beside her, nervous but determined. Children, Violet began, her voice gentle but firm. Mr. Calloway and I have something to tell you. Emma, perceptive despite her young age, spotted the ring immediately. Mama, your hand, Violet smiled, holding out her finger for them to see. Yes, Emma, Mr. Calloway has asked me to marry him, and I have said yes. James looked up at Nicholas with wide eyes. Does that mean you'll live with us? It does, Nicholas confirmed, if that's all right with you. James considered this, then nodded solemnly. I think that would be good. You know how to fish and ride horses. Nicholas chuckled. That I do, and I'd be happy to teach you more. Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. Will we have a big wedding? Can I wear a pretty dress? We haven't decided on the details yet, Violet told her. But yes, you'll have a pretty dress. All eyes turned to Sarah, who had remained silent. She met her mother's anxious gaze, then looked at Nicholas. Will you make my mother cry? She asked directly. Nicholas knelt down to be at eye level with the girl. I will do everything in my power not to, Sarah, but I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. What I can promise is that I'll always try to make things right when I do. Sarah nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer. All right then, I think it might be nice to have a house with a yard. The simple acceptance brought tears to Violet's eyes. She opened her arms and Sarah stepped into them, allowing herself to be held. "Thank you, sweetheart," Violet whispered. "Your papa would want us to be happy, you know." Sarah nodded against her mother's shoulder. "I know, Mama." The wedding took place on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees turning gold against the mountainsides. It was a simple affair, held in the small church in Central City, attended by the few friends the family had made in their time in Colorado. Mrs. Daniels, surprisingly sentimental beneath her gruff exterior, insisted on hosting the reception at the hotel. She even closed to regular customers for the day, allowing the dining room to be decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. Violet wore a new dress of deep blue, with the lace collar Nicholas had given her months before. The children were scrubbed and polished to a shine, Emma in a frilly white dress, the boys in new shirts and trousers that Nicholas had insisted on purchasing. "You look beautiful," Nicholas whispered as they exchanged vows, his blue eyes never leaving her face. "As do you," she returned, meaning it. Nicholas Calloway in his best suit, clean-shaven and solemn with emotion, was a sight to behold. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Nicholas kissed her gently, mindful of their young audience. The children cheered, even Sarah, who had spent the morning helping her mother with her hair, a tentative olive branch that meant more to Violet than any elaborate celebration could have. The reception was joyous but brief. By mid-afternoon, the newlyweds and their children were riding in a rented buggy toward their new home, a small but sturdy house on the edge of town that Nicholas had been preparing for weeks. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway," Nicholas said, helping Violet down from the buggy. The children scrambled out behind her, eager to explore their new surroundings. "It's perfect," Violet said, taking in the neat front porch, the smoke rising from the chimney where Nicholas had arranged for a fire to be lit in anticipation of their arrival. Inside, the house was sparsely furnished but clean and welcoming. A large main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a kitchen beyond. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms, one for the parents and one for the children, though Nicholas had mentioned plans to add another room come spring. "I know it's not much," Nicholas began, but Violet stopped him with a finger to his lips. "It's everything," she said firmly. "Everything we need." The children were already exploring, exclaiming over the simple comforts that seemed luxurious after their cramped quarters at the hotel. A bookshelf with a few carefully chosen volumes, a rocking chair by the fire, a quilt on each bed, sewn by Mrs. Daniels and the ladies of her church as a wedding gift. As evening fell, Nicholas built up the fire while Violet prepared a simple meal from the supplies he had stocked in advance. The children, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep early, piled together in their new bedroom like a litter of puppies. Alone at last, Violet and Nicholas sat before the fire, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than I ever thought possible again," she admitted. "Nicholas, when I think of where we were just 6 months ago." "Fate has a way of taking unexpected turns," he said thoughtfully. "When I rode into Black Hawk, I never imagined I'd find a family waiting for me. And I never imagined I could love again after Peter." She turned to look up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "But I do, Nicholas. I love you with my whole heart. And you, Violet Calloway." He kissed her properly then, a husband's kiss, full of promise and passion. Later, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Violet felt a sense of peace she had not known since before Peter's death. The road ahead would not always be easy. Life in the West seldom was, but they would face it together. A family bound by love and choice rather than merely circumstance. As winter settled over Black Hawk, the Calloway family established new routines. Nicholas continued his work at the livery stable, where he had indeed been promoted to foreman. Violet took in sewing to supplement their income while managing the household. The children attended school regularly, returning home to a warm house and a hot meal, simple luxuries that had once seemed unattainable. Christmas brought a celebration none of them would soon forget. Nicholas cut a small pine tree from the mountainside, and the family decorated it with paper chains and popcorn strings. There were modest gifts, handmade toys for the children, a new shawl for Violet, a fine pocket watch for Nicholas that the children had saved their pennies to help purchase. But the greatest gift came on Christmas Eve, when Violet whispered her news to Nicholas as they lay in bed, the house quiet around them. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "You're certain?" "As certain as one can be," she confirmed. "Come summer, there will be a new Calloway in the house." Nicholas gathered her close, his joy evident in every line of his body. "I never thought. That is, I hoped, but at my age." Violet laughed softly. "You're hardly ancient, Nicholas, just 33. Old enough to have given up on having children of my own." He placed a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "Not that Sarah, James, and Emma aren't mine in every way that matters, but this." "I know," she said softly. "It's a new beginning in every sense." They told the children the following morning, after the gifts had been opened and the excitement had somewhat abated. "A baby," Emma repeated, her eyes wide. "A real baby brother or sister?" "Yes," Violet confirmed, "though we won't know whether it's a brother or sister until summer." James looked thoughtful. "Where will it sleep? Our room is already full." "I'll be adding on another room in the spring," Nicholas told him, "and in the meantime the baby will sleep in our room in a cradle I'll build." Sarah had been quiet, watching the adults with her usual perceptiveness. "Will you love the baby more?" she asked suddenly. Because you're both its parents." Violet's heart ached at the question, understanding the fear behind it. "No, Sarah, never. A parent's heart doesn't divide when a new child comes along, it grows. Nicholas and I will love all of you equally, just as I have always loved you, James and Emma, equally." Nicholas nodded in agreement. "Sarah, when I married your mother, I made promises not just to her, but to each of you as well. Those promises don't change with a new baby. If anything, they become even more important to keep." Sarah seemed to accept this, though a shadow of uncertainty remained in her eyes. Violet made a mental note to spend extra time with her eldest daughter in the coming months, to ensure she felt secure in her place in the family. As winter gave way to spring and spring to early summer, the changes in their lives continued. Nicholas, true to his word, added another room to the house, working evenings and weekends until it was complete. Violet's body changed too, her belly swelling with the new life growing within. The children responded to the coming baby in their own ways. Emma was endlessly curious, asking questions about how the baby ate and grew. James took a more practical approach, helping Nicholas with the house expansion and offering to give up some of his toys for the newcomer. Sarah, after her initial concern, became quietly protective, reminding Violet to rest and bringing her cups of tea without being asked. On a hot July evening, just over a year after Nicholas had first seen Violet and her hungry children in the Black Hawk saloon, their family grew by one more. After a relatively easy labor, not nearly as difficult as with Sarah, Violet assured a worried Nicholas Thomas Peter Calloway entered the world, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. "He's perfect," Nicholas whispered, holding his son for the first time, his weathered face transformed by wonder. "He is," Violet agreed, tired but radiant. "Would you bring the children in? They've been waiting long enough." The three older children entered the bedroom cautiously, awed by the small bundle in their mother's arms. "This is your brother," Violet told them, turning the baby slightly so they could see his face. Thomas Peter Calloway. Peter, Sarah repeated, her voice catching. After Papa. Yes, sweetheart. Your father will always be part of our family, and this way your brother will carry a piece of him too. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling a full, genuine smile that Violet hadn't seen since before Peter's death. Can I hold him? Of course. Sit here beside me and I'll show you how. As Sarah cradled her baby brother with James and Emma crowding close to see, Nicholas moved to stand beside Violet's bed, taking her hand in his. Thank you, he said softly, for everything the children this home are, son. For giving me a family when I thought I would always be alone. Violet squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. And thank you, Nicholas, for 4 plates of food when we needed them most, and for everything since. He bent to kiss her, a gesture of love and gratitude and promise. Around them, their children, all 4 of them, now formed a tableau of family happiness that neither could have imagined on that fateful evening in the Black Hawk saloon. The years that followed brought changes, both expected and surprising. Nicholas eventually bought the livery stable from Mr. Johnson, turning it into a successful business that supported the growing family comfortably. Violet, with baby Thomas thriving, began teaching at the local school, her education and natural patience making her a beloved figure in the community. Sarah, James, and Emma grew and flourished under the loving guidance of both parents. They never forgot Peter Fairchild. Nicholas made sure of that, encouraging stories and memories, but they came to love their stepfather deeply, each in their own way. For Sarah, the turning point had been the naming of her baby brother. For James, the hours spent learning to ride and care for horses. For Emma, the bedtime stories and unfailing patience with her endless questions. Thomas, growing from baby to toddler to young boy, knew nothing of the hardship that had preceded his birth. To him, Nicholas and Violet had always been together, and Sarah, James, and Emma had always been his adored older siblings. He was the bridge between past and present, the living embodiment of their new beginning. 3 years after Thomas's birth, the family welcomed another addition, Catherine Martha Calloway, named for both Nicholas's mother and the cook, who had been kind to the Fairchilds in their darkest days. With her mother's auburn hair and her father's dimpled smile, Catherine completed their family circle. On warm summer evenings, Nicholas and Violet often sat on their porch, watching their 5 children play in the yard as the sun set behind the mountains. These were the moments when Violet felt most keenly the journey they had taken from desperation to contentment, from hunger to plenty, from grief to joy. You ever think about that night? Nicholas asked her once, both of them knowing exactly which night he meant. How different everything might have been if I hadn't been in that saloon at that exact moment. I try not to, Violet admitted. It frightens me to think how close we came to never meeting, to never having this. She gestured to the children, to the home they had built together. Nicholas nodded, understanding. I believe some things are meant to be, Violet, that even if I hadn't been there that night, we would have found each other somehow. Perhaps, she said, leaning against his solid shoulder, but I'm grateful it happened as it did, those 4 plates of food. She laughed softly. Such a simple thing to change the course of so many lives. The best decision I ever made, Nicholas said firmly, wrapping his arm around her. Though asking you to marry me comes in a close second. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their yard, Violet Calloway counted her blessings. 5 healthy children. A home filled with love and laughter. A husband who had seen her at her lowest and lifted her up with kindness and respect. A life richer and more fulfilling than any she could have imagined on that desperate evening when her children clung to her skirts, hunger in their eyes and fear in their hearts. From such beginnings, such endings. From 4 plates of food shared with strangers, a family forged by choice and love. From the wild, unforgiving West, a home where tenderness flourished. From grief and loss, new hope and joy. It was, Violet thought, watching Nicholas call the children in for supper, a story worth telling, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the unexpected paths that lead us home.